We live in an era where everything seems to be at the touch of a button. Information, entertainment, social connection, all available in seconds. We have never had so many resources, so many options, so many distractions, and paradoxically, we have never been so unmotivated. This growing apathy that affects millions of people around the world is often interpreted as laziness, lack of discipline, or even moral weakness. But what if this conclusion is wrong? What if the problem is not the absence of motivation, but the excess of stimuli that suffocates any possibility of genuine connection with oneself? This is exactly the thesis that many contemporary scholars have been advocating, and which resonates deeply with the thoughts of Viktor Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist and survivor of Nazi concentration camps. Frankl had his family exterminated in Auschwitz and spent years living with death, hunger, and brutality. Yet he managed to find within himself a strength that did not come from pleasure or the hope of freedom, but from something much deeper: meaning. For Frankl, human beings are driven above all by a will to meaning. It is not the pursuit of comfort, pleasure, or success that keeps us alive, but the ability to attribute significance to our existence, even and especially in the most extreme circumstances. This thought sheds a disturbing light on the reality we face today. If genuine motivation arises from meaning, what happens when an entire society is conditioned to seek only pleasure and distraction? What happens to the human psyche when every moment of boredom is filled with a video? Every pause is occupied by a notification. Every silence is drowned out by external stimuli. This exploration proposes a radical reflection. Perhaps you are not unmotivated. Perhaps you are just exhausted. Exhausted from chasing goals that are not yours, from consuming content that adds nothing, from living in a constant state of distraction. The lack of motivation in this scenario is not a defect. It is a symptom, a warning that something more essential has been lost amid the noise. The human mind was not designed to cope with the constant bombardment of stimuli that define modern life. In millennia of evolution, our brain adapted to natural cycles of activity and rest, focus and dispersion, presence and introspection. But in recent decades, something has changed drastically. We have entered an era of hyperstimulation, where every second of silence is filled with notifications, bright screens, artificial sounds, and an avalanche of information, competing for our attention at every moment. What was once considered idle time, moments to reflect, feel, just be, is now seen as wasted time. Technology, instead of being an ally of consciousness, has often become an anesthetic for the soul. We scroll through endless feeds, not because we care about the content, but because we cannot bear silence. We binge-watch series, watch short videos, consume news at a frantic pace, not to inform or grow, but to escape. Escape from what? From ourselves. This behavior has profound consequences. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with motivation and pleasure, is constantly activated by small spikes of digital stimulation. But these spikes are shallow and artificial. The more we expose ourselves to them, the more insensitive we become to the natural stimuli of life. What once excited us, a meaningful conversation, a creative project, a quiet walk, begins to feel tedious. Our brain, addicted to novelty and immediacy, unlearns to value the deep, the slow, the significant. This is the invisible root of modern demotivation. Easy pleasure kills real motivation. When every tiny opportunity for pause is filled with a digital reward, we lose the ability to desire deeply. It's not that you don't want to change your life. It's that your reward system is being hijacked by stimuli that merely mimic achievement. This leads us to an even more unsettling reflection. If we are so busy fleeing boredom, are we not also fleeing the questions that truly matter? Because it is in silence, in the absence of stimulus, that the great questions of existence emerge. As Viktor Frankl warned us, reflecting on human suffering and modern existential emptiness, modern man has less and less time to reflect, less courage to make decisions, and less freedom to find his own meaning. But it is precisely this ability to find personal meaning that sustains his dignity as a human being. What happens to a mind that never rests, that never silences, that is never allowed to simply exist without stimulation, without expectation, without distraction? The answer is simple but devastating: it fragments. The overloaded mind does not think, it merely reacts. It does not contemplate, it consumes. And over time, this mind loses its most precious ability to reflect. Reflecting is more than thinking. It is stepping back and observing. It is allowing thoughts to settle, emotions to take shape, values to reveal themselves. It is in this internal space of silence and elaboration that we build our identity, that we understand our experiences, that we connect with what truly matters. But when every microsecond is invaded by a new stimulus, this space is eroded. In its place, a frantic, anxious mind emerges, unable to sustain a deeper line of reasoning, let alone an existential search for meaning. The tired mind seeks relief, not clarity, and that is where the danger lies. Because a mind that seeks only relief becomes dependent on anything that promises a quick escape. Social media, food, pornography, shopping, excessive productivity, anything that distracts from immediate discomfort, even if it costs long-term well-being. This is the trap. Excessive stimulation prevents us from thinking deeply, and the absence of deep thought condemns us to repeat the same empty patterns day after day. Moreover, the exhausted mind is a mind that loses touch with itself. Without moments of introspection, we no longer recognize our true emotions. We do not know what we want. We cannot identify what truly moves us. We become at the mercy of external impulses, living according to what is suggested, advertised, or imposed upon us, and not from what emerges from within. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard said that the greatest form of despair is to choose to be something other than oneself. But how can one choose to be oneself if there is never time to find oneself? The mind that does not reflect is a mind alienated from its own essence, and it is precisely this state of alienation that fuels what we call demotivation. Because when we are not connected with our emotions, our values, our most authentic goals, any action feels forced, artificial. Motivation does not arise from nothing. It is the byproduct of inner connection, and this connection requires silence, requires space, requires pause. As Viktor Frankl stated, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. But what happens when that space is destroyed? When there is no longer an interval between stimulus and response, when there is no more choice, only automatic reaction, we lose the very essence of what makes us human, the ability to pause, reflect, and choose our path based on deeper values rather than immediate impulses. It is common to hear phrases like, "I feel stuck," "I can't do anything," "It feels like something is sucking me from the inside." These expressions are not just outbursts, they are diagnoses. In a world where everything revolves around productivity, performance, and high achievement, feeling unmotivated is treated as a personal failure, as if the person were broken, as if something were missing inside them. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if this apathy is actually a symptom of a sick system, of a soul suffocated by superficiality? In this context, demotivation is not weakness, it is protest. It is the muffled cry of a psyche that can no longer chase after empty goals, imposed targets, stimuli that promise happiness but deliver emptiness. It is the silent collapse of someone who has spent too much time living outward without ever looking inward. It's not that you don't want to act, it's that you are tired of acting without purpose. It's not that you lack strength. It's that you have already exhausted your energy trying to adapt to a life that does not represent you. The symptom of demotivation reveals a painful truth. We are trying to force movement where there is a lack of meaning. We are trying to rekindle a flame using false fuel, and the soul knows it, feels when something is shallow, when there is no truth, when we are merely playing a role, and that is when paralysis arises, not because we are incapable, but because we are disconnected from what truly moves us. Imagine a plant placed in poor soil, exposed to artificial light 24 hours a day. Can it grow? Maybe, but it will be weak, pale, disconnected from its natural rhythm. This is what happens to the human mind when it lives immersed in constant stimulation, in incessant demands, without time to root itself in its own being. Demotivation in this case is the body saying we need to stop. It is the soul saying we need to go home. Frankl already warned about this with surgical precision. When a person cannot find a deep meaning in life, they distract themselves with pleasures, but distraction is not fulfillment. And when the emptiness returns, because it always does, we realize that the problem was not the lack of movement, but the lack of direction. What we need is not more productivity, but reconnection. In one of the darkest periods of human history, Viktor Frankl survived the horrors of Auschwitz, Dachau, and other Nazi concentration camps. He witnessed the worst of humanity. He saw men lose everything: family, dignity, identity. He saw bodies become numbers, lives reduced to mere survival. And even there, amidst hunger, pain, and death, he identified something surprising. Some managed to keep the spark of life, not because they were physically stronger nor luckier, but for a much deeper reason. They still had a why. Frankl realized that those who had a clear sense, something or someone to live for, a purpose greater than themselves, were the ones who resisted psychological collapse. He called this the will to meaning, and made this idea the heart of his psychotherapeutic approach, logotherapy. For Frankl, human beings are not motivated, as Freud said, by the pursuit of pleasure, nor, as Adler suggested, by the pursuit of power. The deepest drive of human beings is to find meaning in their existence. When that meaning is lacking, existential emptiness arises. The same emptiness we today camouflage with distractions, toxic productivity, and incessant stimuli. The most impressive aspect of Frankl's work is the realization that meaning can be found even in pain. Even in extreme suffering, there is room for dignity, for choice, for transcendence. Life never ceases to have meaning, he said, even in the face of inevitable suffering. This completely challenges the modern logic that we need to be well to produce, that we need to be motivated to act. Frankl reverses this. Often it is by acting with meaning that we rediscover strength. Purpose is not a luxury, it is a basic psychological need. This understanding changes everything. If motivation depends on meaning, then its absence is not a sign of weakness, but of disconnection from what truly matters. And this disconnection is intensified when we live for empty goals, status, social validation, numbers, appearances. Frankl invites us to ask another question. What am I living for? Not how to have more energy, but why is it worth getting out of bed? Not how to be more productive, but what truly moves me. In his words, man is capable of enduring any how as long as he has a why. And that why does not need to be something grand. It can be a child, a personal mission, an ideal, even a simple task. But lived with authenticity, the essential thing is that it is genuine, that it comes from within, that it connects you to something greater than the immediacy of now. In a society where the absence of stimulation is almost seen as a threat, talking about silence sounds like heresy. Silence confronts us. It forces us to listen to what we have been avoiding, our most chaotic thoughts, our most repressed pains, our most uncomfortable questions. And yet, it is precisely in this seemingly hostile territory that the key to reconnecting with what truly matters resides. The modern human has been conditioned to fear emptiness. They cannot stand waiting, cannot tolerate being alone, do not know how to simply be. But this emptiness, this space unfilled by stimuli, is not a mistake. It is an invitation to pause, observe, reorganize. Because it is only when the noise ceases that we can hear the voice of consciousness. It is only when the excess dissolves that the essential can emerge. Frankl said that life demands a response from each of us, but to respond one must first listen, and listening in this saturated world has become a forgotten art. We are so accustomed to the constant flow of information, opinions, and external expectations that we have become deaf to our own inner call. This call is not loud nor spectacular. It is subtle, whispered in the gap between one thought and another, and it can only be captured when we create space for silence. Turning off the phone, refusing another task, saying no to what is not essential. All of this may seem uncomfortable at first, but this discomfort is a sign that you are stepping out of the automatic. It is a harbinger of clarity, because before motivation comes silence. Before aligned action comes honest listening, and before purpose comes the confrontation with what you have been avoiding. Yes, silence can be disconcerting. It can expose insecurities, doubts, resentments, but it can also reveal forgotten values, authentic desires, unexplored directions. The discomfort we feel in the absence of stimulation is not the enemy. It is the beginning of the reintegration process. It is in this space that the soul, previously stifled by the constant noise, begins to whisper truths we have ignored for too long. As Viktor Frankl wrote, each of us has to find in his own life a unique meaning, a mission that is his. No life can be replaced, no destiny can be repeated, each one is irreplaceable. But how to hear this mission? How to recognize this call if we never stop to listen? There comes a moment when you can no longer continue living on autopilot, a moment when the emptiness speaks louder than distraction, when fatigue cannot be relieved by another video, another scroll, another task. This is the moment of rupture, and paradoxically, it is also the starting point, because it is when we stop seeking outside what can only be found within that we finally begin to move in the right direction. True motivation is not loud. It does not come with easy promises or ready-made formulas. It does not arise from the desire to please others, to meet external goals, or to follow imposed standards. It emerges when you come into contact with what is non-negotiable within you, with your deepest values, with your forgotten dreams, with your truest truth. It is a silent but relentless force, a spark that once ignited completely transforms the way you act in the world. And this does not require heroism. It does not demand grand gestures or radical changes. It starts with the simple, with turning off the noise, with an honest look at yourself, with the small act of saying, "This no longer serves me," with the movement of going against the chaos, of stopping the frantic running in all directions and beginning to walk inward. Because it is in this internal space that purpose takes shape. It is there that you begin to act, not out of obligation, but out of meaning, not out of impulse, but by choice, not to escape, but to express who you truly are. Demotivation is not a flaw, it is an invitation, a call to stop living on the surface and dive into what is real, a sign that it is time to reconnect, to make silence, to regain your own presence, to act with intention. Viktor Frankl survived hell and emerged from it with a powerful truth. Everything can be taken from a man except one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose his attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose his own way. You still have that freedom even now, and you can use it to interrupt the cycle of superficiality and begin a new narrative, one where you are no longer at the mercy of stimuli, but guided by purpose. The path to a purposeful life does not end here, it is just beginning. And it starts with the simple but revolutionary act of choosing silence over noise, depth over distraction, meaning over mere motion.